All right, so um, yeah, so basically, then I just kind of give some examples of how my thought processes kind of changed. So I started to understand a little bit more what my grandpa was teaching. I finally started to get, he never explained it very well, but I started to get, okay, so he's transcend the person, transcend the self, the ego. That's what's clouding, not being able to be in pure awareness. But, like I said, I was always confused. What do you mean pure awareness? What do you mean the flow? Is that some hippie thing, like race mixing thing? Is that some sort of like, oh, just being pure awareness, like some sort of hippie, like meditative state? Like, but now I understand it's like to see the truth or whatever, if that's possible, because people have different vantage points and stuff. And maybe the only way you can really articulate the truth, as my grandpa would maybe possibly say, is like through art or something, right? Where there's juxtapositions and like contradictions and stuff like that. And that's the thing that kind of confused me with my grandpa too, is because my grandpa would be like, don't attach yourself to anything, so you can be open to pure awareness, or you can be open to inspiration and the truth and stuff. But then he'd be like, but my framework of understanding is everything's energy and there is no God and everything's energy. And it's just like, but then I'm like, no, I like the ideas that the Hindus would be saying, where they'd be like, yes, God is a form, but God is also formless, or, just contradictions, because, that expands you, that breaks you free of any, rational articulations, So it's like, I like that idea, but my grandpa seemed to be, moving more toward the, well, I don't believe in a separate God. That's magical thinking. But, how do you know that there isn't magic, But, well, because it's magical thinking. It's the, No, it's like, I kind of like the, I like the ideas, like, even in the Bible, where apparently they have the Elohim God and the J God. And, like the Christian scientists say that, the Elohim God is a goddess, or, like the true God, and the J God is a physical God, whereas the Elohim God is like the non-material, and really the truth is non-material and there is no thing. But then I also like the idea that there is a thing, so that there's substance, but there's also not substance. There's physical separate things, but there's also no things. And I like the ideas of the contradictions, because they break you free. And so you can't get caught up in any one notion. And I kind of like that idea. I kind of feel like the existence is kind of amorphous and even malleable toward different perspectives, because it's kind of playful, kind of like, what the Hindus talk about with Krishna. So, but my grandpa seemed to be more like, no, it's it's all an energy event, and it's complexifications and synergy yielding potentials, anti-entropic rewarding function. He seemed to me to be on one side, as opposed to, and that's what I kind of I studied a lot with the Hindus things, where there's Shiva worshippers and there's Vishnu worshippers, and Shiva would be more like energy. Vishnu worshippers would be more like worshiping the form or worshiping the idol, whereas Shiva worshippers are the ones who are more like, I am God. And that's one thing that I also noticed, I started to recognize, like, when I started to figure things out a little more, is like, I remember I went to the Agape church, and there was this, like, the Agape leader wasn't there that day, but there was this woman, and she looked Jewish to me, but she was like, yes, I came to the realization that we are gods, and I was like, yeah, well, that's what the Shiva worshippers, that's what the demons say in the Hindu mythology. But now I don't want to judge them, because it's like, okay, so the demons are, I started to recognize, like, that's what Shukracharya is Satan. He's a planet Venus, and he wants to destroy religion. He wants to destroy Vishnu, and he wants to stop the worship of idols. He wants to stop the worship of, like, Indra and the demigods, and he likes the demons, and he wants to worship Shiva. But in my opinion, the way that I looked at it, he's a communist. He didn't like religion. He wanted to destroy religion, because he's like, religion is just fake. He's like Nietzsche, it's like, it's all just fake. It's just all for power. And to me, it's always, I can see it through the prism of, the white people versus the black people, or the Aryans versus the Dravidians. The Aryans are the Vishnu worshippers, and the Dravidians are the Shiva worshippers. And you see, like, even the black people in our society be like, no, we are gods, and, kind of like going anti-religion, like, no, I am God, like the Nation of Islam. That'd be kind of like Shiva worship. And it's like going against religion, especially going against Christianity, which would be more Vishnu worship, worshiping the idols, or worshiping, because that's the maintenance, that's the preservation, that's Vishnu worship, whereas Shiva's destruction and communism, right? And Vishnu worship would be more like, capitalism, or more like, Ayn Rand type of thing, like not against communism, right? More like fascism, right? So, that's the way that I saw it, and that's the way I see it, but my grandpa, so and they articulate, what they saw in their realities, where the Aryans are fighting the Dravidians the demons versus demigods. You know, the demigods are like, they're nice and they're religious and they seem pure, they seem humble and stuff, but really there's flaws in it, and they might be exploitative, and they might be, you know, fake. They might be, you know, fraudulent in their religiosity. It might not be authentic, right? And then the demons, so that's why the demons and Shiva worshippers want to destroy them, and that's like the white people versus the black people. The white people who are more rich and more humble and stuff, right? They seem more rich and humble, but then the black people who are like more poor, and then they're fighting the white people, and that's what you see in the Hindu mythology versus demons and the demigods and everything, right? The Dravidians versus Aryans, and you know. And you see that in reality. So that's the way I kind of see it. But my grandpa, to me, he always seemed to be more toward, you know, but he also recognized, he seemed to be more toward the Aryan side, right? But then he also would recognize, like, yeah, but that's not necessarily the flow. And so he recognized the complexities of it, you know, the Dravidian versus Aryan complexities. And, you know, we're you know, being humble, you know, being nice and good isn't necessarily being good. You know, and being bad isn't necessarily being bad. You know, there's different ways of flow. So I started to understand it more. And I started to get more of a comprehension of what my grandpa's teaching. But at the same time, I was trying to trying to tell my grandpa, like, Grandpa, I want to talk to my mom and dad, because, you know, the whole reason why I showed my mom and dad the quadrant model to begin with was because I wanted help. I wanted to make my life easier so I could study more, so I can, you know, as my grandpa would say, leverage my assets, increase my potential, and to have their support and stuff, right? Because I want them to see I discovered something huge, and maybe you could, you know, with their support, I can do much greater things. But instead, it was the exact opposite. They started to persecute me. My grandpa started to persecute me. Oh, it's not the theory of everything. What about all the threes in reality? You know, he didn't understand. He didn't know the truth. The quadrant model is, you know, the way that reality is. And he obviously was not able to see it, you know? But, you know, to have the support of my mom and dad and to be able to talk to them. But so I'm trying to talk to my grandpa. I'm trying to tell him, like, you know, Grandpa, you know, can you please help me to talk to mom and dad? And my grandpa was like, well, one thing is your dad is never going to talk about basketball. He hates basketball. He's never going to talk about basketball. But then I was like, well, first off, it would be nice if he could talk to me about basketball, because I have nothing negative to talk about. I fixed my shot. I want to explain to him what the shoot away did. I can't explain to people because I don't want to make good shooters think, but I can explain to him. And I want to, you know, he helped me with my shot my whole life. He shot with me every day. He's the one who made me a good shooter. But sadly, the shoot away machine messed up my shot, and he didn't know how to fix it. He didn't know, because I was picking the ball off the rack, that I wasn't quote unquote shooting sideways, because you can't move into it correctly. I'm not gonna go into details because I don't want to make good shooters think. My grandpa's like, well, he's never going to talk about basketball. I already talked to him. He hates basketball now. He doesn't even watch the NBA. He hates basketball. I'm like, Grandpa, you don't fucking know. You don't fucking get it. And my grandpa, I always felt like he contributed to all this. He's the one who, like, he's the one who started the whole thing, like, no talk about the past thing. And he's the one who, like, I always felt like he's the one who tried to get me separated from my mom and dad. Make Ryan independent. And he didn't help. So but I told my grandpa, well, you know, okay, let's say he doesn't want to talk about basketball. That's fine. I don't need to talk about basketball, but I would still be able to see him, and I could still use their support and still use, you know, but, you know, if he's not talking about basketball, that's weird, and it's not cool, and it's like, and it's going to be inauthentic, our interactions. But, you know, if my grandpa and my dad are going to be so stubborn about it, like, oh, he's never going to talk about basketball, he hates basketball. Okay, well, I would still prefer to talk to him and have some sort of interaction and have a little bit of peace and you know, some respect, as opposed to, like, complete dismissing me and completely throwing me to the side. So I told my grandpa, okay, well, you know, it's true. I would be able to, if my dad will completely refuse to ever talk about basketball, then I would still prefer to talk to him, even if I'm not allowed to talk about basketball, which would be weird, but I would still prefer that, you know. But I never got the chance to even ever talk to my dad. Ever since high school, really, I never got the chance. I never got the chance to explain to my dad about the shoot-away machine, you know, because he hasn't even spoken to me really since high school. He hasn't really even spoken to me at all. The one time I showed him the quadrant model, he didn't believe it. Since then, he hasn't spoken to me at all. So, you know, but my grandpa's like, oh, he's never good. Well, one thing is, he says don't talk about basketball. You have to understand, you know, he hates basketball, Ryan. I'm like, dude, you haven't helped things from the very beginning. So then I started reading this book to my grandpa by Virginia Satir, and it was called The Satir Model of Parenting. And it was talking about how, you know, don't alienate a member of the family, and listen, you know, and in therapy, you listen to what the person wants to talk about. You know, you don't dismiss what the person wants to talk about. You don't invalidate what the person wants to say, and you don't, like, identify a patient and throw him to the side. And she's basically doing the exact opposite of what my grandpa did. But my grandpa's whole thing was, like, he was like the Fritz Perls, like, human potential. Like, you don't need to talk about the past. Just, just be in the moment and just go all out and don't make excuses. And it's true. My grandpa, but he didn't, see, I did have a dualistic software in terms of I was anti-white, but my grandpa never knew that. And my grandpa didn't help me. My grandpa just, but it's confusing, but maybe he did help me a little bit because he helped me to see my inclination, I had communistic inclinations, right? And anti-white inclinations, anti-Aryan, right? But the thing is, like, still, my grandpa didn't help. He didn't help me to have realizations of this. He made me more confused. He isolated me more. It wasn't helpful. He could have made better discernments and I was never allowed to talk. So, like, my grandpa's thing was, if you're in the flow, you're never going to talk about the past. You're just going to go all out and it doesn't matter if your mom and dad don't talk to you. Just go all out and just give it. No, it does affect you if your mom and dad talk to you. I could do so much better if I had the support. That's why I wanted to show my mom and dad the quadrant model, so they could be impressed and they could be happy that I discovered the theory of everything, and maybe that could elevate my life, make my life easier, make my life better. But my grandpa didn't fucking do that, so it's just so frustrating. So I told my grandpa, I was like, well, why didn't we, I wish that we could have done the satir model of therapy with my family, and maybe things wouldn't have gone so fucking horribly as they have. And my grandpa was like, well, maybe you're right, maybe the metapsychiatry, my therapy didn't work. And like I said before, I heard that my grandpa, when I was at a Thanksgiving dinner, my other grandma and grandpa were making fun of my grandpa because one of his patients committed suicide, And they're like, but my grandpa was like, well, you don't know what that patient did, like trying to blame the victim again. And I was like, dude, I really do think that my grandpa's therapy does not fucking help. It didn't help with me, and I think it just makes people crazy. It made my family crazy. I think it made my family into bad people, because he doesn't explain things, and he doesn't, like, it's not a helpful fucking type of therapy. And it made me crazy. I know, it fucked me up, dude, and it still does, And it's just like, dude, so what would be helpful is if I could talk to my mom and dad, see them, have things be normal, and not have all this weird shit going on, But, so I tried to explain it. So my grandpa admitted, he was like, maybe it would have been better if we did the satir model and, you were allowed to talk about the past and, we didn't, and your mom and dad should have talked to you and maybe that would have been a better model than what I did. But he was like, but what can you do, right? But, so that's kind of where I'm at now. And so, but I was kind of, I was talking to my grandpa and I got frustrated and I was like, Grandpa, help me talk to mom and dad. And I got frustrated with them. And then he was like, because I forget what exactly happened, but I was angry. And then my grandpa was like, well, he said, he made like a threat, like he wasn't going to teach me anymore again. But he was like, I don't know if I am or not. But so since then I've given him space and I'm, cause I don't want to get him act too angry, cause I want to learn more and I want to study more. And I'm starting to get things with Dr. Horace, reading his books and stuff, and I'm starting to understand things better, but at the same time, I don't want him to do so for like the last few months, I haven't talked to my grandpa, but I don't want him to throw me to the side again and not teach me anymore, but at the same time, he has to understand, like, maybe he's not perfect, and that's the thing, like, but he acts like he's so perfect, like, so when I was studying with him, he was, we were reading Dr. Horace things, and Dr. Horace was talking about, like, willing, and then my grandpa was like, oh, yeah, well, you and your dad willed, and that was the problem with the shoot-away machine. I'm like, it wasn't the fucking, he didn't say the shoot-away machine, but that was the problem. That's why you and your dad fight. It was due to will. And I was like, no, it was because of the shoot-away machine. And then my grandpa was like, oh, you don't want to learn. You just want to believe what you want to believe. And I'm like, no, Grandpa, really? He wants to make me the victim, the bad guy, the victim, the bad guy. It's like, it was because you were willing. It was because you, and I was like, well, what about Dad? Was he willing? He was like, yes, your dad was willing too, and so were you. But the thing is, it's like, no, I was an amazing player. I was so automatic. I never thought everything was perfect. But then the shoot-away machine, because I was shooting on it, it was messing up my shot. Then my dad told me to do the wrong thing. If it wasn't for that, there would have been no fights. The only fights was about my shot, and it was because of the shoot-away machine. So trying to come up with all this fucking shit like, oh, it must have been because of your consciousness and your software and your will. It was the shoot-away machine. It's so basic. Now let's move on. We don't have to, now, because that's the problem. My mom and dad are so like, oh, it's because of Ryan had obsessive-compulsive, and he had a will problem, and he wouldn't just let things, accept things, and he tried to make things happen. No, it was the fucking shoot-away machine, dude. And now we can move on, and not everybody's perfect. And why the fuck would you throw your own son to the side and not talk to him, But, and then, And then, but my grandpa, like, he seems like arrogant too. So my grandpa's like, well, you know, I have such high software, and you know, my grandson, my sister had a son. He's like, my grandson, my great grandson, you know, he really likes me so much, but he doesn't like his other grandpa because his other grandpa has a lower level of software, but he's always loves to see me, and I'm so amazing, and my software is so incredible. And I'm like, dude, you're arrogant, dude, and you think your shit doesn't stink, you know? But still, I want to learn more from my grandpa, and I have learned a lot, you know? And so, but, you know, you have to understand, like, okay, I could have learned a lot, but also we could handle the situation better. I don't need to be isolated and thrown to the side. Now, another thing that's interesting is, like, well, maybe, or I'm gonna stop right now, but really quick, like, maybe also it's all astrology, you know? My grandpa's whole thing is like, you know, you choose everything. You know, you choose your and it's best to just take responsibility. But I ask him, like, well, okay, so why did we choose to not be flying around right now if we choose everything? You know, like Dr. Horace New Age saying, well, why aren't we flying around? Why aren't I 7 feet tall if I choose it? Why wouldn't I have chosen? He's like, well, maybe, you know, before you lived, you know, you chose these, you know, restraints and stuff. So, but you choose it, and it's best to live that way. And I'm like, I don't know if that's true. First off, I don't know if that's true, and I don't know if that's the best way to live, you know, but I also question, like, maybe like astrology says, no, you didn't, you're like, okay, well, maybe you also chose your astrology chart, right? But, like, you know, maybe I am a victim of my circumstances, like, because I have Pluto, Venus, and Scorpio in the 4th house, which is the family house, and Pluto and Venus and the moon don't like to be in Scorpio, and that's all in my 4th house in the family house. And that's like, the Pluto amplifies it. The moon and Venus don't like to be in the 4th house or in Scorpio, and it's in the 4th house, which is the house of my birth family. And maybe that's why my birth family has such crazy circumstances. But then I have Jupiter in Cancer, which kind of helps out my consciousness, and it's in the 12th house, I think. And you know, so I have things that are like helping me to be a good philosopher and stuff. But I have the family difficulties, you know, and maybe I can't escape that. Maybe, you know. But maybe I chose that, as my grandpa would say. Maybe I chose to have that astrology chart, you know? But it leads to paradoxes. Like, so I have to take responsibility for everything, but I chose to also, you know, have circumstances that I won't be able to choose. You know, it's like so many contradictions in this stuff. But regardless, he thinks, and I always saw it as right-winger, like blame the victim, extol the victor, you chose it, you know, and that's why I always lent toward communism, because I was like, no, you know, destroy the white supremacy, destroy the, you know, the status quo, destroy but now I recognize it more like, now when I read the Bible, I'm like, you know, okay, Abraham was attacked by the Hittites, you know, but before I'd be like, oh, the Hittites were Aryans, and they, you know, therefore they're the bad guys. But now I'm like, well, maybe Abraham was attacked by the Hittites because Abraham was sinning. So I look more toward blaming the victim in ways. But I also acknowledge that, yes, sometimes the victim is to blame. So there's so many complexities, and I can go on and I'll maybe continue more.